Welcome to the Budo Bite mini podcast, your essential guide to the fascinating world of Japanese Budo, culture and philosophy. I'm Alex Bennett, a long-time martial arts practitioner, researcher and writer based in Kyoto, Japan, with decades of experience training, teaching and navigating the rich complexities of Budo. Hi, I'm Alex Bennett, and I've spent decades in Japan researching Japan's martial culture with a special focus on my old friend Miyamoto Musashi. I published a modern Japanese translation of Musashi's original writings, making them more accessible for today's readers. In English, I produced a comprehensive volume that includes Gorin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, and every other known work attributed to Musashi. And most recently, I completed a 7-year project, the first complete English translation of Yoshikawa Eiji's legendary novel, Miyamoto Musashi. My aim with this series of podcasts is simple: to cut through the myths and present Musashi in all his complexity, man, warrior, and thinker. And at the same time, I still love and enjoy the rich storytelling that surrounds his life, because the legends are a part of what makes Musashi so fascinating. The Musashi most of us know comes from Yoshikawa Eiji's blockbuster novel. It's a mix of scraps of fact and a whole lot of fiction. The wise priest Takuan, the beautiful Otsu. What's real is perhaps less glamorous, but no less fascinating. And that's what I want to do in this series. Strip back the legend and introduce you to the man himself, Musashi as he really was. Like a lot of people, my first brush with Musashi wasn't through old history books, but through fiction. It was Yoshikawa Eiji's blockbuster novel, Miyamoto Musashi, first serialized from 1935 in the Asahi Shimbun, that's the Asahi newspaper, and running all the way through to 1939. In Yoshikawa's telling, Musashi is this fiery teenager who gets swept up in the great battle of Sekigahara in 1600. He charges into it alongside his childhood mate, Honiden Matahachi, both of them hoping to prove their manhood in a blaze of glory. The trouble is, they backed the wrong horse. Fighting on the losing western side against Tokugawa Ieyasu, they got absolutely crushed. And from that defeat, Musashi turns his back on the material world. Instead, he hurls himself into the life of the wandering duelist, lean, hungry, living for and on the edge of a blade. Yoshikawa throws in the wise old Zen priest Takuan, who pops up every now and again with cryptic advice, a bit like Gandalf with no hair. Now, historically, Musashi never actually met Takuan, but it works for the story. And then there's Otsu, the beautiful young love interest who tempts Musashi away from swords, but in heroic fashion, he resists. Always the Ronin, never the husband. But it's a great swashbuckling romance. But the truth? Well, Musashi never married. A work written way back around about 1720 mentions a courtesan called Kumoi, who hung out with a guy wielding 2 swords. Another text suggests Musashi had a child who died very young, but Musashi himself never wrote a word about romance. If he did have a love life, he took it to the grave. So, Otsu is pure fiction. Even so, she's remembered every October in Mimasaka, which is one of the towns in Japan that claim Musashi as their son. They hold a women's kendo tournament in Mimasaka bearing her name. But anyway, back in Yoshikawa's novel, Musashi lives perpetually on the razor's edge, dueling with the best swordsman in the land. He wipes out the famed Yoshioka clan in Kyoto single-handedly, using equal parts cunning, nerve, and skill. But everything builds to the ultimate showdown, his duel with Sasaki Kojiro on Ganryu Jima. Kojiro is armed with a monstrous Nodachi sword nicknamed Drying Pole. He waits on the beach impatiently while Musashi deliberately takes his time. And on the boat ride over, Musashi carves an oar into a makeshift wooden weapon and ties a headband around his forehead to keep his hair out of his eyes. When they finally clash on the sand, the tension snaps. One explosive exchange later, spoiler alert, Musashi crushes Kojiro's skull with the oar sword. At the very same moment, Kojiro's blade slices Musashi's headband clean in two, just nicking his forehead. A dramatic reminder of how fine the line is between life and death. Now, Yoshikawa's tale sort of became the definitive Musashi. It set the tone for generations of comics, films, and TV dramas. Never mind that, although he based it on quite a bit of research, Yoshikawa himself admitted that there was barely 60 or 70 lines of verifiable historical material to work with. Fact was thin on the ground, but that didn't matter. He spun legend out of scraps of other legends, and the legends stuck. So when I talk about Yoshikawa's Musashi, I'm not just talking about a ripping story. It's a cultural landmark. And as I said, written between 1935 and 1939, it took the swordsman from being a half-remembered dueling thug to a towering warrior philosopher whose rise from reckless youth to enlightened master really struck a chord with readers. At a time when nationalism and militarism was pretty much on the rise in Japan, the serial became a phenomenon. Radio readings, films, and later manga, TV, video games, you name it. Well, especially these days, but back just after the war, even GHQ's post-war censorship couldn't blunt its impact. For better or for worse, this novel fixed Musashi in the public mind as the ultimate samurai hero. The way it cycles through battles, training, and reflection mirrors the serialized format. While characters like Takuan, Otsu, Jotaro, Yori, Osugi, Matahachi, Akemi, and of course, Sasaki Kojiro show the temptations and the hurdles he had to push past. In the end, Yoshikawa's Musashi eclipsed the man himself, becoming both moral allegory and adventure saga. And that's why it still shapes how many people think about the samurai ethos today, and in particular, Miyamoto Musashi. And here's where I should add that I've translated Yoshikawa's Miyamoto Musashi into English. It took me 7 years to complete, starting just before the pandemic, and it will be coming out in March 2026. It was a massive undertaking, and it stands as the only complete translation of Yoshikawa's entire novel. I tried to keep it as close to the original as possible by giving each of the characters their own voices, and that means dialects, quirks, and personalities, rather than flattening them into a one-size-fits-all translation. Yoshikawa himself was one of Japan's most popular historical novelists of the 20th century, known for epic historical fiction that captured the public imagination. Now, Musashi is perhaps his most enduring work. Yes, it's mostly fiction stitched together from tiny fragments of fact, but that's the beauty of it. He took a swordsman who was, well, pretty much just a shadow in history and turned him into Japan's most famous warrior. Now, that novel shaped how not just Japan, but the world has come to picture Musashi, for better or for worse. But anyway, it's precisely because of Yoshikawa's genius that the legend of Musashi continues to loom so large. Now, way back in the day when I was a young fella, I wasn't fussed about what was true or not. The romance of Yoshikawa's Musashi was enough to pull me in. And once you're hooked on that image of the ultimate swordsman, it's very hard to let go. In fact, it was this great story that eventually pulled me back to Japan in my late teens, chasing my own kind of musha shugyo, which is intensive pilgrimage of martial arts training. And that has shaped my whole life. So in a way, I'm kind of indebted to Yoshikawa Eiji and indeed Musashi. So without detracting from the brilliance of the novel as an awesome story for the ages, I'm going to dedicate the next, 9 or 10 podcasts in this Musashi series to introducing you to the real Musashi, based on years of academic research I've done in Japan. Who was he? What do we really know? Because, let's face it, there's so much bullshit out there about him. It's time to strip back the legend and see the man underneath. And believe me, he is still a legend, so don't worry about that. So that's the takeaway. Yoshikawa's Musashi is a brilliant story, but it's mostly fiction, stitched around bits of fact. The priest Takuan, the romance with Otsu, the swashbuckling drama, they're poetic inventions that stuck because they're cool. What little we do know about Musashi paints a slightly different, but I must stress this, no less impressive picture. And that's where we'll go in this series, peeling back the legend to meet the real man behind it. I hope you enjoy this series of mini podcasts on Miyamoto Musashi, the man, the myth, and the mystery.